In this video, I'm going to take you through 4 patterns that can really ruin long distance relationships and the different communication patterns that may be happening. And of course, this actually has a huge application specifically if you're in a long distance relationship with a more avoidant leaning attachment style, or if you are an avoidant leaning attachment style. So we'll cover what those things are and what you can do instead. So, first and foremost, one of the biggest things that can ruin long distance relationships is a lack of transparency and openness. If there is some sort of dynamic where there is not transparency being shared, it can actually cause somebody to feel super disconnected on the other end. I had a client once, and we'll call this client Jane, and she was dating a man who was in a long distance relationship with her, living quite far away. And this man was an avoidant leaning attachment style. And she would find that on weekends, she would say things like, "Hey, what are you up to tonight? What are your plans? How are you?" Not because they were planning on getting together, because she lived literally on the other side of the country, but because she was trying to make conversation and see what was going on. Now, she wasn't a particularly jealous or possessive person. She was dominantly securely attached, but he would say things to her like, "I'm going for dinner with a friend." And he wouldn't explain who the friend was or where they were going to dinner or how late he'd be staying out or anything like that. And it's not that he was intending to necessarily, withhold information, but that made her feel insecure. Like, what kind of friend? Is this somebody else that you're interested in? Like, what's going on? And, there was elements of that showing up in the relationship. And eventually they had a conversation where she really led that conversation. We talked about how to do it. But eventually they had that conversation, and she said he truly didn't realize that his texts were making her feel that way. He was not explaining who the friend was because he felt like she didn't know this friend of his. And so, he wasn't going to go into this whole long text message explaining who the friend was. And it felt like a lot of effort. And because this communication was so closed off all the time, there was just this missing lack of transparency and openness. And in the end, his friend was his childhood friend, and he showed pictures from the dinner and that night and what they did, and they were catching up and going for some beers. And there was this like context behind it that was quite innocent, but he had no idea how much he was impacting her because of that lack of transparency and openness. And I'm not saying that in a long distance relationship, we should be like, "Who are you with all the time, 24/7?" But when we have that natural, "I'm going to dinner with this friend from here," we just share context and details. Not only does it stop, other people's minds from jumping to conclusions, but on top of that, it just feels like we're including our partner who may be far away into our present lives, right? It feels like they know what's going on a day-to-day basis. They're updated with you, and that really strengthens the connection. The second big piece is a lack of vulnerability. Sometimes when there's a lack of vulnerability, as you can imagine, we really keep that distance, not just actually physically being distant, but we keep an emotional distance from people through vulnerability. And one of the biggest things I've worked with people on in long distance relationships is being more vulnerable with each other over the phone, over Zoom, over FaceTime, so that you're closing that distance emotionally despite it being there physically. And that can look like asking deeper questions. That can look like sharing more about your feelings. That can look like digging deeper into yourself and sharing more detailed and specific things about your day. Watch this for a second. Imagine the difference between me and, let's say I'm dating you watching this video, and you in this conversation are trying to feel included in my life. And you say, "How was work today?" And I say, "Oh, it was good. Work was good. How was work for you?" Versus instead I say, "Work was great. Today I recorded some content for YouTube. I talked about these specific videos. This one was my favorite, and here's why. I love this topic. I'm so interested in this topic." And the more specifics and the more details I give, the more the other person feels connected to me. And so when we have closed conversation, closed communication, and it's interesting because a lot more avoidants do this over text message, and they don't even realize this. I've had so many conversations with avoidants who don't even recognize that they're doing this. But the more we have closed conversation and the more we leave out specifics and details, the more disconnected people feel from us overall. So it's a really interesting thing to keep in mind. Number 3, a huge one, is when there's a lack of consistency. A lack of consistency where when there's already so much consistent distance, it's just like the nail in the coffin. Like, it can really make people feel defeated in a long distance relationship. So having structure or time periods in which you talk, and you can compromise on that, right? Like it doesn't have to be every day at 3 o'clock or, every weekend at 3 o'clock, but it could be every Sunday afternoon you FaceTime. And that afternoon could be somewhere between 12 and 5. You decide on the Sunday. Like there can be structure and flexibility at the same time. But the more there's consistency around that, the better, because no consistency can make people feel really disconnected, especially if you've got more of an anxious and an avoidant leaning person. It can cause a lot of unnecessary challenges. Also, if you want to do a much deeper dive, by the way, if you're in a long distance relationship, we have courses all about the fearful avoidant with the dismissive avoidant with the anxious preoccupied, the AP with the FA. We actually have courses all about this that you can check out for free for 14 days. Because using the link below, you actually have access to all of Personal Development School for the mental health month of May for 14 days. This is just something we're doing right now. And so that will give you access to all the courses, everything. But we actually have, for anybody who's got their relationship on the rocks, the attachment style pairings courses for like how to master that relationship, how to really see that relationship through and thrive and get it off the rocks if you're struggling. So you can definitely check that out for free for 14 days using the link below, along with all other events at PDS every day, webinars with me, webinars with our other trained facilitators and coaches, social events, all kinds of cool stuff going on in there that you can see on the webinar calendar if you want to check it out. And number 4, lack of progress. I find that relationships when they're long distance, they can do well for the first year without progress. With no, and by progress, I mean like progress towards commitment. Dismissive avoidance or fearful avoidance may see progress as like opening up more, feeling more connected, having a better and better time, sharing more deeply. And those are all forms of progress. But generally, our more anxious leaning people, including FAs, but also APs, they tend to see progress as like having conversations about the future. And progress doesn't have to be, we've made a full plan, one of us is moving. It doesn't have to be anything like that, but it can be things like, hey, in the next 2 years, one of us will move. And that comes up in conversation sometimes. Like people can see an end in sight in regards to the distance being closed, in regards to that being the end of a chapter. Even if it's a 5-year plan, that works better for some people than just no plan at all. So having some kind of plan that you discuss at a very high level, have the potential to move towards, all of these things really insinuate progress, especially to the more anxious leaning individuals. And these can really empower the long distance relationship to become secure as both people are working on themselves within the relationship context. So that is it for today. Come join me in PDS, check out the 14-day free trial, join me in webinars, ask me any questions you have. You can come on camera, off camera, whatever's most comfortable to you. I would love to see you there. And thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you're enjoying it as well. And I will see you in future videos.